joining us. Today, we are going to talk about a lot of the misconceptions around sexual assault and why women don't come forward. And we are very, very grateful to Florence Paquet, who is a sexual therapist, to help us kind of unpack all of these different beliefs, mostly false beliefs around women's behavior after they're assaulted and things such as that. I'm a survivor myself. I've said that many times on the show. So I can say from my own experience, but I also appreciate that Florence is here to kind of give us the psychological reasons and clinical views behind why women react the way they do, especially because women carry so much shame with this and so much blame, especially like not only why did I do this, but then afterward, yeah, why didn't I fight? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? So maybe, Florence, I think that's kind of where I'd like to start because it seems very simple to people who have not been sexually assaulted. And I'm saying, especially, I don't know, unfortunately, I have varying degrees of sexual assault in my past, and every single one of them was from someone that I knew. None of it was me walking down an alley and getting assaulted, which is really the great majority of sexual assaults. From what I understand, is that true? It's usually someone you know. Okay, so what is it behind us? Why is it that we freeze and don't scream and fight back?
Yeah. I'm really glad we're talking about this. I'm really glad that you're, sharing your story. So just thank you for that. There's a lot to unpack here, and it's a little different for everyone. And that might be actually the most important thing for me to say is that everyone is different. Everyone's their chemistry is gonna respond a little different to this based on genetics, based on how they were raised, based on the, you know, community around them. So like if you feel differently than what I'm about to say, that's also normal and okay. I think that's the biggest thing here is to recognize like everybody processes these things differently. From a psychological standpoint, when we've been assaulted, I mean, the first thing that is very likely to happen is some form of dissociation, some sort of, when we're climbing down the ladder of our, nervous system regulation, fight and flight maybe didn't work with us with some of our assaults, especially if it was somebody we knew. We
Mhm,
don't want to hurt them. We don't want to fight them.
mhm.
Maybe there was no place for us to run. And that is especially when we enter into freeze. Um, and if we're in a freeze state, being vocal is impossible. We're completely shut down. Our ability to move, our ability to think in an expressive way, expression is a sign of like a fully, I have very watery eyes, by the way.
Oh, no worries.
So,
Wintertime. Yeah, I'll
um,
give it to you.
yeah. Expression, by the way, is like a very, this is thriving mindset. This is like when we're in our happiest, most comfortable, most safe, stress free environments. That's when we express. That's when we feel loose in our bodies. And so to expect anyone to come out of even fight or flight or freeze with this sort of ability to freely express themselves is really unrealistic. And so even recalling the moment to talk about it with an officer, with a friend, with a therapist might require a great degree of support in the form of your internal coping mechanisms or externally, or might just be impossible without a little bit more trauma therapy of some kind. So that's a major reason why we shut down and we don't express ourselves post an event. And that makes it all the harder with a loved one, right?
Mhm.
There's
That's what
a
I was just thinking when you were saying that shot
yeah,
someone that you trust and know and love. It's hard to process all of that and then react appropriately. Everything inside you just freezes up.
everything's frozen up. Everything's frozen up. Your frontal lobe is gone. Like you're not going to be able to even put coherent thoughts together. That's not what you're being built to do to survive that moment. And I think that's another big message to me is that like it wasn't because there was something wrong with you or that you were being bad or stupid. It's like you were in that moment surviving. You were built to shut down, you were built to close up. Your brain isn't supposed to be doing anything but watching. That's it. And then when you're talking about people that I mean, the cost benefit of expression there, I think people really underestimate. By that I mean the benefits of expressing yourself and advocating yourself versus the cost of survival within that relationship that might be fundamental financially or physically. It might be your home, or it might be, a partner or a friend or a family member where, if we disrupt this relationship, we're actually disrupting a lot of relationships. So there's that cost. And then the cost too of like facing it, working with your nervous system, doing that work with some sort of healer to, get your nervous system back into expression. I mean, that is a ton of energy, a ton of cost. And the benefits, comparatively, oh, so I said my truth? We live in a society that like really says that that's like a big deal. But the reality of speaking your truth in the face of those sort of costs is like a lot of people don't choose it. And I understand that.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I appreciate so much what you said because I believe, this is my personal belief, this is at the core of everything in our society. As long as females are born into, it's really a world, not just our society, where we are seen as prey and responsible for our own assaults against us. If we were drunk, what were we wearing? All those kind of things. Until we rectify that and shift the consciousness in thinking by educating what really happens, aside from that men are really taught to be predators in very subtle ways. I think of, I came of age in the late 70s and 80s where all like these teenage movies, pretty much the plot was silly teenage boys trying to get these girls drunk so they can have sex with her.
Yeah.
I laughed too, that we were very much programmed to accept our own abuse and not say, hold on a second. I always think of that statistic that man's greatest fear from women is that she will humiliate him. That's women's greatest fear from men is that they will inflict violence on her.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But we're not on a level playing field.
No.
Every woman knows there's every woman, what is it? 90% of women will experience some form of sexual assault in their lifetime. And that's not even including all the sexual abuse, verbal abuse that we get in jobs or whatever.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really, and the thing nobody wants to talk about is the sexual abuse in our own homes from grandfathers, uncles, so many women I know. And that is like, people want to pretend it's such a rare thing, even sexual abuse. Someone comes out in the media and says it, and people, they want to pretend it's rare. It's not rare. It's very common. And it comes to the core of why women struggle so much with our own power, our own self-esteem, our own autonomy, because most of us have been sexually assaulted in one form or another, and because we're constantly on the lookout for danger. Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to really express yourself and be creative in a world where you also have to constantly monitor your safety.
Yeah, you literally can't, is like my message. Is like, your nervous system can't be in freeze and in like expression and confidence. Like they're on opposite ends of the pole in terms of your nervous system regulation.
I love that you said that. This is so important. The other thing I want to say, because people do say this all the time. Now, when you're a survivor, you understand this. It's not a mystery to me. People will say, well, why did she stay? Well, you said one thing is financial. Maybe it's in her home. What's she going to do if she's a child? And imagine as a child, and I know many, many women that suffered abuse in their homes, their entire lives. How do you grow into the fullness of who you are when the people who were supposed to be protecting you are the people you needed protection from? that skews your whole being as you go out into the world. But there is one thing I want to talk about. I've written publicly and talked publicly about one of my sexual assaults that happened to me in my lifetime. And it was the first time I got drunk at 15. It was my block party. All my friends were all these boys that I went to Catholic school with, mind you.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'm 15. I don't know what I drank, probably 2 beers or something. But anyway, so I was kind of blacked out and not really there. But what I remember is coming to behind the garage in my alley with these two boys passing me back and forth, and the rest of the boys all laughing while they did that. So here's the thing, and I've seen women do this. I see it in our politics. We have a man who came forward and said, I sexually assault women. He's been convicted. 2 dozen women said he does that. He did it to me. Nobody cares. That's not a deal breaker. And I think that's the core of everything. If a sexually abusive man who sexually assaults women and in a court of law was found guilty of it, it's not a deal breaker for women. Where's our boundary? I mean, talk about being so well trained to not respect your own self and your own body. And here's what I want to say, because I see women do this. I did it myself. And that is almost like we befriend the abuser, just like the millions of women who are, and I know many women myself who suffered sexual assaults in their own homes growing up that are supporters of this man who sexually assaults women. So there's like something in us that wants to befriend them. I did that with one of my abusers. I started calling him my guardian. He keeps me safe. This is the boy who sexually assaulted me. And the psychology of it, I don't know if I was trying to pretend it didn't happen or if I was trying to do like a mind thing with him where he wouldn't hurt me again.
Please.
So maybe as a therapist, you can
Yeah.
unravel that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there too. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind as you're speaking is how much we underestimate how important social survival is. They've done a lot of this. We study. I remember I studied this in high school. You don't have to have like, in other words, like we're taught this, but we're not embodying or embracing it or integrating it on some level. But they did those studies with little baby monkeys, and they took them from their mothers, and they put them in two different kinds of cages. One cage had food, water, and one cage did not have food and water. But there was this little fake mom, and it was warm and soft. The fake mom and the other one was like this cage with these like crazy scary eyes, but it had food and water. The monkeys that had warmth and softness were the ones that were able to reintegrate in back into monkey community well and thrive. The monkeys that had food and water to survive, but no warmth to, to thrive, they didn't make it. They didn't reintegrate. Some of them didn't even survive. Um, and so we have this hierarchy of needs in our heads that says, oh, food and water and shelter, that's the most important thing for a human being. It's not. It is social connection. Think about it. When you're a baby, you're so dependent on your parents loving you. And this goes on like throughout our lives. We are to survive as, the kind of mammals that we are, it is so dependent on social well-being. And so that's one thing, right? So to disrupt, okay, who are your buddies that you're drinking with and you're talking about who you're voting? Well, yeah, that guy was a sexual assaulter convicted. Well, if I say something, what's the cost there? What if I can't connect with my friends anymore? That's actually going to bring up a survival response. But then in the case of your example, befriending this person that hurt you, they talk about fight, flight, freeze, and then fawn. And fawn is actually also really, I've heard different things about this. So somebody, out there, if you're hearing me, please do your own research. But my understanding is that it's, fight and flight are kind of more You're in a more activated part of your nervous system. You're not as shut down. But freeze and fawn are actually like another degree. It's like when fight and flight don't work, we go into freeze and fawn. And so this fawn response is actually part of that, you know, freezing up and trying, as you said, to survive in some way by befriending. Maybe he won't hurt me anymore. That was really powerful what you said there. I mean, that is the core of fawn. Going along with what I just said, social connection is more important to us than eating, drinking, having shelter over our heads.
Mhm.
And so, when we look at these, why is she being so friendly if he's so dangerous? That's exactly why she's being so friendly.
Oh, I love that. Say that again. That's
Yeah,
very important.
yeah. Why is she being so friendly to this guy if he's so dangerous? That's exactly why she's being so friendly, to survive that.
Yeah, that's amazing. This is especially true for those who experienced sexual assault in their own homes growing up. Because many children do say, Grandpa's doing this, Uncle so-and-so's doing this, Dad's doing this. We not only do we not talk about this, but we're not really taught how to deal with it. Very few people are. So he's just being friendly. He's just, oh, that's just the way. So you know that what happened felt bad and wrong, but the people that you trust to guide you and help you grow in this world are telling you it's not a big deal. Don't make a big deal out of it. He didn't mean it that way. So you start, the most important thing for women is that connection between our brain, heart, guts, and that gets all messed up and tangled because what we're feeling and experiencing is so different than what people are reflecting back to us. So we think, well, I can't trust what's inside me anymore, right? Because
Right.
people are telling me it's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
The other thing I think of all the time is the word whore, which I'm fine with. If your
yeah,
girlfriend calls you and says, "Oh my God, I went on a first date and slept with him," and you say, "You little whore,"
yeah.
it's
It's
but
fun.
it's said in a very affectionate, loving way. But
Yeah,
it's still used to weaponize us, which it's just so ridiculous.
yeah,
People say we've come a long way. We've come a long way in some ways, but unfortunately, our um, thinking about men, women, genders, right, wrong, has not evolved as much as we'd like to think outwardly, but inward is where it counts, and inward still has a long way to go. I wrote a piece a while back about, I grew up in northwest side of Chicago. Uh, you know, Everyone had big families. We hung out at the local park, and every once in a while you'd see a group of boys lined up outside the bushes, and we'd be like, oh, she's in the bushes again. There was a girl in the bushes underneath. She was always there. Obviously, I'm not going to say her name, but we'd laugh. The boys laugh. And I look back on that, and honestly, it's hard not to weep when I think of this tragedy, and everyone just called her a whore. She was just a whore. Well, now at this point, we know two things. One is she was most obviously probably getting abused at home. And this is the only way she knew how to get that love and affection, which happens to a lot of us. Even as we get older, we put up with a lot just to be told we're beautiful, we're loved, we're cared about, even if it's in the context of sexual abuse. That's how, like what you were talking about, the monkeys, that's how much we long for that feeling of warmth and love, is that we will tolerate abuse. As children, we don't have a lot of choices, but it sets up a pattern, and then as adults, we kind of continue that pattern. So I think of that, and the reason it's so important to me that we start discussing these things and educating men, but especially women, is because imagine if when we saw something like that, we were taught from the time we were young, oh, that poor girl, she's in a lot of pain. And to go up to her and say, you don't have to do this. I'll tell you I love you. Come here, let me hug you. Let all your sisters surround you and say, You're beautiful, you're kind, you don't have to do this in order to hear that. And to say to these boys, stop degrading yourself.
Yeah.
We're not here just for your pleasure
Yeah.
in the bushes in a park. This doesn't bode well for you. This doesn't make you the kind of man you want to be. You know what I mean? But we're not taught those things. We just fall into the old programming of she's a whore and this is what boys do. Hey, if she's going to be there, I'll do it. And I think it's really time to stop fostering those false beliefs and really start looking at what's underneath this and how we can do better as a society.
That would be great. Yeah, I would love that. I just got to put a plug in for this comedian named Jacqueline Novak. She just had a special on Netflix. Highly recommend. The way she talks about what you said earlier, the biggest fear of a man is to be humiliated, and all the stretching and contorting women do to, like, you know, nurture their precious little fragile. I mean, it is hilarious. It's a great way to, to kind of um, laugh in the face of this, like, thing that we don't have a ton of control over other than
What was her name again? Say her name again.
Jacqueline Novak.
Jacqueline Novak. Is she on Netflix? Comedy
Her
special?
special is On Your Knees. And it's
Oh,
about
oh, I think I saw
blowjobs.
that advertised. Yeah.
Yeah. To,
Okay.
be clear, it's about blowjobs, which she puts in a lot of not even subtly subversive about, the lengths we go to
Yeah.
those fragile egos. And can we take those bumpers off, please? Like,
I
yeah.
think, I don't know if it's still true. My guess is it probably is, but several years ago, I heard that that's kind of the new thing because girls don't want to get pregnant, so they're giving guys blowjobs.
Yeah.
This, to me, no problem with that. But I think it's a reciprocal act. And if you're a teenager and you're in a car with a guy and that's what he tells you to do, you're going to get a minute or two, however long they last,
Yeah.
at that age of the hearing the kind of things you want. And probably for a couple minutes afterward, you're going to get cuddled, which is what you're after. It it is never beneficial for a young girl to, this is my belief. You can blow me apart if you want, but for a young girl to service a young man, is at that age, it's different when you're older in relationships and for whatever reason that works out. But at that age, when you are choosing to service a man, there's nothing in it for her. There's nothing in it for you. At that age, that young, doing that, and to see that as a viable alternative to intercourse, to me, just perpetuates the we are here to please men.
Yeah. I mean, this screams like how horrible our sex education is, right? Like,
Mhm.
because none of us, or very few, I grew up in the South, I grew up Southern Baptist. I didn't
Oh,
hear
I
anything.
was Catholic, so we're close. We're neck and neck.
That's yeah, yeah. Opposite sides of the fence, but really at the core of
Yeah,
it, there's a beating heart
yeah.
of guilt and shame. And um, what strikes me about this is, like, you know, raising children to think about, what do you like? What do you like? What does your body like? And learning about the things that your body likes, genitally, sexually or not, and saying, talking about, well, how do you want to share that with somebody that you really like someday? Because you will meet a person that you want to do these fun things with, and that's okay. That's coming from a place of what you like and
Mhm.
fun and feeling, um, you know, care between you and this person. Um, and what does that look like? It means curiosity. Hey, partner, what do you like? And them asking you the same. And, um, you know, getting into those waters together from a place of building trust. You don't have to jump into the deep end of the pool, you know, doing a blowjob. You can
Yeah.
kiss and caress and, laugh and, do all these other things and see, how does this person continue to treat me as I deepen into intimacy with them, as I deepen into that pool with them? How does it feel? And it might feel great. And if that's the case, by all means, have more fun. But right, if we're coming at this from a place of, well, someday somebody's going to ask you to do these sorts of things, and here's how you can kind of just do it well, or here's how you can keep that person around, like, which is kind of the rhetoric that I heard. How to please your man.
Oh, yeah.
And then the same thing, how to please a woman. And none of it was about like asking, like, does this feel good to me? Does this person feel good to me energetically? It was always just how to execute something. That's really what I'm hearing there. It's like, you're just getting into a car, giving some guy a blowjob, and the only thought in your head is, if I don't do this, we might break up, and I hope I don't, have a toothy blowjob. Like, we're,
Or if I do this, he will like me then. If it's a boy,
right.
which is, that never works out. Don't do that, girls.
No,
It doesn't work. He'll like you for the 5 minutes you're in that car doing that.
yeah,
And
right,
it's
yeah,
not going to transfer. It's not
yeah.
going to transfer to the outside world.
And here's the thing: it could, it could, in an ideal world where we're teaching kids again what they like and how to share that with somebody who likes them and cares
Point.
about them. It could be really fun and wonderful
Right.
to have a blowjob,
Mhm.
to give a blowjob,
Right. Yeah.
like, that could be a wonderful experience that does. I believe that sex is a wonderful way to improve our relationships. In the same way any form of play is, laughter is, whenever we're being creative and we're getting a little bit out of, purely analytical mind, and we're getting into our bodies and our hearts, sex is great for that. It can be great for that, but we're not talking about the spirituality. That's a loaded word, but the heart and the soul and the power of love that can be most beautifully expressed through sex in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Amen. I
That's
agree
what
with
it's
that.
for.
I also do believe very much, and in a lot of my meditations in the past couple of years, it's really coming to the forefront that our sexuality as women is so intertwined with our personal power. And I wrote this, where did I get it? Oh, okay. So during a meditation one time, I got this, and this was a year or two ago, and it made so much sense to me because we hear all the time that sexual assault is really about power. It's not about sex. It's about that man needing to have power over you. And I would go so far as to say, trying to take your power from you.
Yeah.
Like, I think men deep down are afraid that women will one day realize how powerful they are. And
Yeah.
that's why they're afraid they'll get knocked off their pedestal. I don't think there's not many people that are doing this overtly. I think a lot of it's covertly, subconscious. We don't even know. We're swimming in water and don't see the water, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so this is what came through me in my meditation: is the most effective way to divorce a woman from her true power is to sexually assault her. Then she will divorce herself from her sexuality, her power, all on her own, because that's what we do, right? When we're assaulted, we gain weight, we drink, we take drugs, we either become promiscuous or we completely shut ourselves down. That seems to be the pattern, and I don't think it's an accident. I say this all the time on the show, that I really do believe this is a time of rebalancing. I believe the divine feminine is reemerging. We have had just this male god forever that is so ridiculous and so intertwined with the patriarchy. And I do agree with the philosophy, because it's all philosophy and beliefs. We don't know anything for sure, But I do believe really it's genderless. Whatever this energy is genderless. But we've been so inundated with the religion, which is so intertwined with patriarchy that we only see male, male, male. So I don't think it's an accident that women are starting to come forward with their stories as the divine feminine is re-emerging, because we need to reclaim our sexuality in all its power. We need to speak the truth of how this has been weaponized against us. Our own sexual assaults. I mean, I just read in the last few weeks in one of the countries, it wasn't here, but psychologically, we still kind of do this, where the woman was raped. It was a Middle Eastern country, I think. Anyway, she was raped and gang raped and brought tremendous shame on her family. And they wanted her to marry one of her rapists to restore the family's honor. And she wouldn't, so they put her in jail. Like, this is still, this is affecting all of us. We think it's separate and it doesn't. This affects the way that people think about women. It's not separate from us. It's all a part of us and what we're ingesting. And the other thing I always say is, you know, most men, when they have a little girl, they'll, you know, and they'll, oh, they adore her, right? Fathers and their daughters and these babies, and they hold them, and you know, they say, oh, when she becomes of dating age, I'm going to be on that front porch with a shotgun. Nobody's getting near her because I know what boys are like. And then since the Me Too movement, when all these women come forward and say, this is how we're living. We are actually pray every single day where we go. And they go, well, that can't be true. Well, then why do you automatically, when you have this little girl, your instinct as a male is to protect her from other men? And if we're saying we're constantly being preyed on by men, well, you're saying that can't be true. So which is it? What, you know, you can't have it both ways. You can't say my natural instinct is protect my darling little girl from the males in this world because I know what guys are like. And then when all the women come forward and say, you guys are absolutely right. It's out here, we're just prey and these things are happening to us. And then say, well, that can't be true. They both can't be true.
No, they can't. Yeah, I mean, the power of, you know, what I really heard in what you said was just talking about the power of like what's happening in the collective and how we are all connected. You know, if again, thinking about that freeze and fawn, the other thing that you talked about is like how, yeah, we gain weight, we start to drink, you know, again, we can't, when we've been violated in such a precious way and we can't face that, we have to dissociate that to like, you know, be a normal person and work a normal job and like have friends, you know, we can't really be processing this wound to our ultimate like sense of self. And we go into freeze and we dissociate and we go into fawn and we perform and we make friends with, you know, the people around us, but with also the society around us. And I think about, right, a huge thing that we also underestimate, you know, something I see in my office all the time, you know, these feelings of, you know, what's going on in Palestine and just, you know, there's a genocide happening, there is, you know, oppression that is just in our faces, and a lot of us are kind of ignoring it because how do we go about our days knowing that's happening and continue to function? And what I see in my office right now is so many people with this dread and anxiety, and they might not be talking about Palestine, but they're talking about the sense of the end of the world. And like we are so connected to these collective forces of oppression, whether it's this horrible genocide that's happening, or, you know, these awarenesses that women are still, you know, being forced to marry their rapists, or, you know, God is a man and he's not gonna, you know, protect you from your brother or dad or uncle that's, you know, raping you.
Right.
Yeah, we're connected to that. We're feeling that.
You know, one of the misconceptions is I've heard several men in my life say this about their daughters, like, she's got great self-esteem. You know, nothing's ever going to happen to her. I've taught her to have. And what that says is women get raped because they don't have enough self-esteem, right? It puts it back on us, and they don't understand. They're trying to be advocates, but what they need to change is the way men see women. What they need to do is call out their male friends when they're objectifying women. And they need to call it out. I always say this about this man that's running for president again, that's a convicted rapist. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know about any man. I don't care if he's the funniest comedian, if he's the greatest actor, if he's the most phenomenal businessman. I don't care what else he does. That's the deal breaker. If you admit you sexually assault women and laugh about it, and then get convicted of it, and 24 women at least come forward and say, he does this, he did it to me. I don't need to know anything else. And I think it's really a testament to how well we've been trained to accept our own abuse, that is not a deal breaker, because they said it was like millions of middle-aged women that really tipped it for him in the last election. To me, that is well-trained women to obey the patriarchy and listen to us talk. You hear women talk down about themselves all the time. I mean, as a woman, I said this a few months ago, I was talking to someone. I was sitting at lunch with a group of women, and the one woman was telling me how someone she knew, his wife died, and and they're older. They're like in their late 60s or early 70s, and how to get on these dating sites now and things like that. And she said, but I told him, don't put what you do, because he's an attorney. And I said, why did you say that? And she said, you know how women are. They just want money. I'm like, oh my God. The men say this, the women say this. Is there anybody that is supporting women? Like, we're against us, men are against. Like, we're so well trained to hate ourselves. You hear people go to these rallies, interview the women, and they're like, women don't belong in the presidency. We're too emotional, which is hysterical if you've been watching politics the past 7 or 8 years. Like, it's drama to the nth degree, but women are too emotional, So it's all these things that we're trained to believe about ourselves that we need to talk about and start breaking apart these falsehoods about what our role on this earth should be.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I mean, the major thing I kind of want to underline is those, women, attacking other women. I want to talk about or shift that perspective to women in fawn. Women voting for, a convicted rapist are women in fawn. They're
Women,
just
what's that word you're saying? Women, FAWN?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It's so many of us are in fawn. We're in such a great degree of nervous system dysregulation that we're trying, this is how we're surviving. We're fawning with this collective that oppresses us, with these politicians who are convicted rapists. It's, and the solution to me is thinking of it, okay, we have to really learn how to connect to a deeper part of ourselves again, the one that we're running away from, that we're dissociating from. And this is for men too. I think all genders, what we're talking about is how can we train or heal if necessary, training before many of the wounds happen and healing after the wounds happen, to get back in touch with that core sense of self outside of this, outside of this larger society or people closer in our lives that we're stuck in a fawn response with. These young men that are, in the bushes with that gal, they're in fawn too. If I don't do this thing with my friends,
good
what's
point.
going to happen? And you're trained at that age when you're a teenager, developmentally appropriate for you to be seeking, peer relationships.
Their approval,
Your brain is built to be doing that. So of course they're doing that. And again, how can we at a young age cultivate that connection with self, that core of innate goodness, maybe people would even say their spirit, um, in the face of these wounds and oppression that are happening. And if men are in touch with that too, like that's going to benefit. Like all of us can be benefited from being, you know, doing that work to get beyond freeze and fawn and get back in touch with our core.
That's a really good point. And men play a huge part in this. I mean, it's up to us to heal ourselves and start shifting the dialogue and the thought process within ourselves. But men play a huge part. It's interesting. I was just with a friend the other day, and she was telling me how protective he is of women. That he was at an event one time, and this woman got really, really drunk, and a man followed her in the bathroom and raped her. And so she came out and she was like, he beat the hell out of that guy. He cannot stand, the thought of some man raping a woman. And I said, doesn't he support this man that's running for president right now? So, the macro is the micro. The micro is the macro. You can't separate and say, I want my daughter to grow up in a world where she's protected and doesn't have to face assault around her every corner on her college campus or whatever, and then continue to support people who abuse women. You can't do it. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Right. And the other thing I want to make sure we make clear is whenever women come forward, especially if it's someone rich, famous, whatever, or if it's an athlete, God forbid someone should accuse an athlete that you hold on a pedestal that you've never met, but he would never do this. But anyway, people automatically go gold digger. She's making out for the money and the fame because, we treat women who come forward so lovely when they come forward with their claims. Who doesn't want that attention? But false accusations of rape for people who study these things, and there are people that study these things, not all facts are false. Between 2.5 and 5% are false. And we react like the opposite is true. Right. We react like most of these things are not true. Once in a while it's true, and it's not. And these are the things that educating each other, talking to each other about this helps eradicate these false beliefs about what actually is going on here. So I think that's really, really important to say that we have been trained to believe sexual assault rarely happens, and women come forward all the time just to get money and fame, which is ridiculous. There's actually Netflix again, a series on there right now called American Nightmare. And it is about this couple. Did you see it or hear about it? A couple were in their bed, boyfriend, girlfriend, home in bed. They get invaded in the middle of the night, and they take the girl, set up a camera watching him, drug them, whatever. The police automatically assume he's killed her. And in the interviews, you can see they're just like, you're lying. And in the meantime, she's being raped by this kidnapper multiple times in this place that if they would have listened to him and kept his phone on, found her and prevented at least one of the rapes. But anyway, so then when they get a phone call that she actually is alive and she says, I'm being held. So like, oh, it's her. She's creating a gone girl situation. So again, they're blaming her for what they're not even investigating whether it's true. But here's the part that really struck me. So before they find her again, they're talking to the father, and the father says, she was raped when she was 12. And the policeman, talk about misconceptions, lack of education and ignorance, says, okay, well, just so you know, what happens a lot of times when women are assaulted once, they make it up to relive the thrill of it. This policeman in a place of authority who's interviewing women honestly believed that women get thrilled by being raped. I don't know if men have a fantasy of raping women so they think it's thrilling. That is the last word any woman who's been sexually assaulted would use to describe what happened to her. And I think it's all this ignorance. It's just plain ignorance that perpetuates this belief and continues us on in this really destructive dance that we're doing. So before we close, Florence, I would like to ask you this, because this is probably certainly most of the women I know, and I'm going to guess a lot of the women out there. I have been keeping this secret for so long. I'm so ashamed. I don't even know where to begin to start unraveling this. So I say to you as a therapist, as a representation of these women who have not been able to address this yet, but are starting to feel like they're ready because it's eating them alive. What first couple of steps should they take?
I'm trying, I'm hesitating because I'm trying to come up with an answer that is accessible to everyone. Therapy isn't accessible to everybody.
Unfortunately, that's
Although
true.
I would say finding someone that you trust who can, we've been talking a lot about the fawn on the individual and the collective level, the fawn response. And the way out of that is to meet that wounded part of you with love. I mean, we're talking about here, there's a lot of anger here, there's a lot of shame here. At the end of the day, we're not going to move anywhere until we can love into healing that which we are the most angry about. And so that part of you that you're most angry about, the part of you that, let that person in, or maybe you're telling yourself that one of the fucking thrills, excuse me.
Don't worry about it. I speak French fluently, so don't worry about pardoning your French.
Whatever, because you're gonna turn that hatred in on yourself, right? And that's why you're gonna dissociate and fawn and freeze and all that stuff that we've been talking about today. We need to bring love to that wound somehow. That's number one. We got to bring love to that wound somehow. Can we do that? Is there some friend? Is there some, figure in your community? Maybe it is somebody at your church, maybe it's somebody, there's these different communal spaces. A friend, a family member, a therapist, if you can access it. There are community centers, right, where there's a sliding scale or they take more kinds of insurance. Somebody that you can talk to that will hold that part of you with love and teach you how to, in that way, that part of you deserves love too. That's number one. Find somebody, because it's hard to talk about with anybody. So it's got to really feel safe. Like you really got that crucible to just share that wound with somebody that can hold it with love. And do not give that wound to somebody that you feel like cannot hold it with love. I could go on about how to build trust with somebody, make sure they're that right person. The other thing that I think about, something that I really love to use in my spaces with folks, is getting people back in touch with that voice. There's a lot of different ways to do that. One kind of fun way to do that is to start using tarot cards, not for like fortune telling or anything other than, art helps us hear a little bit more from our subconscious. We know that from listening to music, to watching movies. It brings something out of us. And so a daily journaling practice, where maybe we listen to a song or we pull a tarot card and we just see what's coming up. This is our voice. This is that little part of us that we've kind of neglected or turned down in some way. So a little journaling practice might be nice. I like pulling tarot cards because I think it gets us in the mindset too of like trying to connect to something sacred within ourselves. Another tool I like for that is, again, setting that intention to reconnect with yourself on a deeper level. Take a few breaths with that. Say, where does that live in my body? And just kind of let your hand feel out where that might be. Just try over here. Oh, okay, let's try over there. Like, let it be free flowing. And then, wherever your hand settles, just kind of asking any question. What do I need most today? What's something my inner self wants to tell me today? and just kind of practicing listening. It might be really subtle or awkward at first, but just continue to revisit that core in yourself. Um, those are that's kind of the dance that I try to get, moving when I'm working with people. Loving that original wound and getting you back in touch with an inner, deeper core of self.
Those were such beautiful and helpful tips. And I hope anyone who's watching or listening really takes them to heart. And if nobody said this to you, I will say it's not your fault. I don't care what the circumstances were. It's not your fault. Before we close up, one thing I do want to share something I did, but this came after a lot of work on myself. It may work for some people, may not work for other people, but I honestly believe the reason so many women, so many females are sexually assaulted in their lifetime is because of not just our training, but the training of the men. Like I said, if she's drunk, she's fair game. If she's here, she's fair game. And it's kind of this, it's a game. That's the thing. If she says no, well, let's push her a little more. Let's push her to a yes, 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 that type of thing. And what I did a few years ago, because I, like I said, grew up in this northwest side of Chicago neighborhood. Everyone kind of, these Irish Catholic neighborhoods, everyone kind of hangs together for life in a lot of ways. Some people move here and there, but you usually stay pretty connected. So I know all these boys still. I see them here and there at things or whatever. But a few years ago, I realized one of them in particular, because I was especially close to him, I needed to write him a letter. And I said, I need to say to you the things I couldn't say as a 15-year-old girl. And I said them all. And the reason I did that, I didn't even know if he'd even respond, but I have never disclosed publicly who these now boys were, simply because I do know them. I've seen them throughout my life. They're not, if they were people that were continuing to abuse women, or I thought that was their character, I would be on top of the roofs screaming their names. But I know it's part of the culture, part of the being young and being almost like it's actually an approved of thing, which is why all these other boys were laughing. Isn't this funny? Let's watch this girl be assaulted, not even thinking the lifetime repercussions that would be on me from that violation. And he wrote me back, and it was what I wish every survivor could have. He took complete ownership, and said, this is not your burden to carry anymore. I will carry it. It was absolutely beautiful. So if you get to a point or are to a point and you have to, like I said, especially if it's a family member and you're going to blow up your family, which maybe that's what you want to do or needs to happen. But I really do believe the majority of men do these kind of things and do feel bad about it. This man felt tremendous shame. But what's interesting is he was trying to pick apart what was so wrong with me at that time. And I did write him back one more time, and I said, you're kind of missing a little bit of the point, which is you weren't a horrible, bad, psychologically damned young man. This was very common. It still is very common, as much as we want to pretend it's not, that women are fair game. And that's the thinking we need to change. That's where the healing needs to take place. Men need to own that. Yeah, maybe I didn't do that, but I laughed while someone else did. Or I saw someone taking a drunk girl into a bedroom at a party and was just like, well, stupid drunk bitch, that's on her, right? Instead of saying, no, we don't do this. We don't do this. So anyway, well, thank you so much, Florence. It's just been wonderful speaking with you. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, can you tell them how to get in touch with you?
Yes. Please, you can find me. Probably the best way to contact me is growwithflow@gmail.com. So to write that out, it's GROW, grow with, so there's two W's, grow with flow, FLO, not FLOW, @gmail.com. So growwithflow@gmail.com. I also have an Instagram that I hope, I've always been kind of with social media. I don't love social media, but do see the potential for education on a broader level, which, you know, this conversation today just reminds me how important that is. So I hope to be using social media more soon. And I do have an Instagram at grow_with_flow at Instagram.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Florence. I really appreciate you speaking with us. All right. Enjoy your day.
You too.
Thanks.